He handed over my entire inheritance to his mistress, while smiling at me across the dinner table. But what he didn't know, I owned the company that paid for his lifestyle. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved one. We were the couple everyone admired. Elegant, stable, and always in sync, or so it seemed. We hosted parties where he'd hold my hand like I was his world, while behind the scenes, he was dismantling everything that belonged to me. Slowly, quietly, with the kind of precision only someone close could manage. He wasn't just my husband. He was my confidant, the one person I thought I could depend on. I grew up being cautious with trust, but with him, I lowered my guard. I believed his promises, his dreams, his carefully crafted lies. When my father passed away, I was devastated. The inheritance was meant to be a safety net, a gift from a man who raised me alone and sacrificed everything. But my husband saw it as an opportunity. He told me he'd multiply it, build something that would honor my father's legacy. I wanted to believe that. I needed to. I didn't realize I was handing it over to someone who had already made plans, with someone else. He called it our future, but he was setting up hers. The signs weren't loud. They were quiet. Too quiet. Canceled dinners. Password changes. Empty glances. My questions were always brushed off with laughter or affection. And I accepted it, not because I didn't notice, but because I didn't want it to be true. Then one night I saw it. A receipt. A gift for her, paid with funds from our joint account, money from my father's estate. A necklace engraved, not with my initials. Still, I didn't react. Not yet, because I wasn't done watching. This story isn't about heartbreak. It's about calculation, about holding your fire until you're certain the explosion will destroy everything they've built. I knew if I played my hand too soon, he'd spin it like I was unstable, emotional, overreacting. I've seen him do it to others, so I stayed quiet, learned everything, watched him dig his own grave with every dollar he spent, every secret he tried to hide, every lie he whispered. And when the time came, I didn't shout. I signed papers. The kind that don't end in apologies, but in consequences. Because he forgot one thing. I never gave up control. He just never saw it coming. We met at a charity event. He was standing by the bar, holding a glass of wine and charming everyone around him. I was there for work, helping organize the fundraiser. He walked up to me like we already knew each other. Smooth, confident, the kind of presence that fills a room. I wasn't looking for anything, but somehow, he made it feel like fate. He asked me out before the night was over. By the end of the week, we'd had 3 dates. He was funny, ambitious, full of plans. Said he admired how independent I was, how I took care of everything myself. I didn't expect to fall so fast, but I did. We got married after just over a year. It felt right. Our wedding was small but beautiful, and the life that followed looked even better. A spacious home, growing investments, vacations that made our friends jealous. Everyone thought we were a power couple. He handled most of the business decisions. I didn't mind at first. He was good with numbers, always had a strategy. I supported him, cheered him on, stayed out of the way. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "I couldn't do this without you." And I believed him. We flew to Paris, Santorini, Thailand. Always the best hotels, always the perfect pictures. We laughed a lot in public, smiled for cameras. I thought it was real. But in the quiet moments, things felt different. He began to speak over me during meetings. He'd change subjects when I asked about finances. When I offered suggestions, he'd nod, then use the ideas later without credit. It felt like I was disappearing, but slowly, like fog swallowing a house. At social gatherings, I turned into decoration. If I tried to share a thought, he'd interrupt or joke at my expense. "Don't mind her, she gets emotional." People laughed. I laughed too, but I felt hollow inside. He made every call, where to invest, who to trust, when to spend. I'd ask questions and he'd say, "You don't need to worry about that stuff. Just enjoy life." It sounded sweet, but it left me sidelined. Over time, people forgot my name. They called me his wife, like that was all I was. No one asked about my work, my opinions. He never corrected them. He let the narrative grow. Sometimes I pushed back, asked for clarity. But somehow, every conversation turned into a lesson about how I was ungrateful, how I didn't trust him enough. And somehow, I ended up apologizing. Every single time. I started doubting myself. Was I too sensitive? Was I misreading everything? I clung to the idea that love means trust, that couples share everything, even when one of them stops listening. One night he told me, "You don't need to deal with finances, I've got you." I smiled, but deep down, it felt like I was watching my independence slip through his fingers. Still, I stayed, because I wanted to believe the dream we built was real, that I wasn't alone in that marriage. But looking back, it wasn't a partnership. It was a performance. I didn't see it all clearly then, but something inside me knew. The cracks were spreading. and it was only a matter of time before the truth came crashing through. The first sign was the distance in his eyes. He was still sitting across from me at dinner, but the warmth had disappeared. His smiles never reached his eyes anymore, and our conversations felt like walking on thin ice. Awkward pauses, forced laughter, and quick changes of subject. His work schedule became unpredictable. Business trips, some lasting longer than usual, started to pile up. He stopped sharing details, brushing off my questions with vague answers. "Just busy," he'd say, as if that explained everything. I noticed his phone was always face down on the kitchen counter, an unspoken boundary I wasn't allowed to cross. When I asked for the Wi-Fi password, he gave a tight smile but didn't share it. New locks appeared on his devices, new passwords he never mentioned. It felt like walls were closing in, isolating me from the man I thought I knew. One night, as I picked up his jacket to hang it, a faint scent drifted to me, a delicate fragrance, sweet but unfamiliar. My heart raced. It wasn't mine. I pressed my cheek to the fabric, desperate to understand, but the smell only deepened my unease. I started noticing small changes at home. My favorite coffee mug was missing. His favorite sweater was nowhere to be found. Late at night, I caught whispers through the thin bedroom walls, soft voices and stifled laughter. When I asked about it, he smiled with that practiced charm and said, "You're just tired. Imagine things." Doubt gnawed at me. I tried to rationalize, telling myself I was overthinking, but the feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, I found an unfamiliar receipt tucked under a cushion, an expensive dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard him mention. The date matched one of his business dinners. I folded the receipt and slipped it into my pocket, silent but aching. I began watching his habits more closely, noting the little signs. Sudden calls he rushed to answer, messages he deleted quickly, his habit of turning his back when scrolling through his phone. Whenever I confronted him, he responded with a cold smile and a sharp retort. "You're imagining things. Stop being dramatic. I'm tired of your accusations." His words stung, but I kept my composure. I didn't want to fight blindly. I needed to see the truth clearly before acting. At night, alone in our bed, I stared at the ceiling, questions swirling in my mind like a storm. Who was he becoming? And who was the woman whose scent haunted my clothes? I kept these doubts locked away, silent and aching, waiting for the moment when the cracks would become impossible to ignore. The phone rang late that evening. I was in the middle of dinner, the clink of silverware against plates filling the quiet kitchen. When I saw the number, a cold knot formed in my stomach, an unfamiliar voice on the other end. "Is this Ms. Carter? I'm calling from your father's hospital." The words came slowly, like a weight settling on my chest. "There was an accident. He passed away this afternoon." I felt the world tilt beneath me. The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp, and I sank onto the chair, my hands trembling. My father, my protector, my guide, was gone. Just like that. The hours that followed were a blur of sorrow and shock. Calls to family members, arrangements I wasn't prepared for, tears that came without control. I kept replaying the moment I heard the news, wishing somehow it could be undone. When I finally returned home, the house felt emptier than ever. The silence was deafening, swallowing every breath. My husband was there, waiting, his face carefully neutral. He pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, love," he whispered, but I saw the practiced calm beneath his eyes. It didn't feel real. That night, I lay awake, the loss crashing over me in waves. I thought of all the times my father had been my anchor through storms, and now I was adrift. The grief was raw, painful, a wound that no time would easily heal. When my father passed away, everything around me seemed to stop. The man who had been my anchor was gone, leaving a void I wasn't ready to face. Grief weighed heavily on my chest, but amidst the sorrow, there came news. A letter from his lawyer saying he had left me a sizable inheritance. I barely had time to absorb it before my husband stepped in, cloaked in a grief that felt almost too perfect. "This is good news, love," he whispered, holding me close. "Your father would want you to use this wisely." He spoke about the future, stability, and growth, painting a picture of security. "Why don't you invest the money in the company?" he suggested. "We can build something together. This could be the foundation of our future." I wanted to believe him. The company was his world, and I thought I trusted him. At least, that's what I told myself. One afternoon, he brought home a stack of papers. "Just some legal documents," he said lightly, sliding them across the table. "Nothing to worry about. Just formalities. You'll be an investor now." I glanced at the pages, still numb from loss and overwhelmed by the complex language. But he was there, steadying me with his touch and his word. "It's good. It's all in our names, joint ownership. We're partners now." A small voice inside urged me to look deeper, to ask questions, but his hand held mine firmly. "Trust me," he said softly. "This is for us, for our future." So I signed. Days went by, and I tried to silence the doubts creeping into my mind. He smiled more, proud of the deal we'd struck. Yet beneath that, I sensed something off. he grew secretive, more guarded with his phone and distant in his eyes. One night, I found an email left open on his laptop. What I saw stopped my breath. Attached were documents transferring ownership of the company, entirely under his name. My heart thundered. The joint ownership he promised was a lie. My inheritance had been used to cement his control, over the company, over me. When I asked why he hid the truth, he gave me a cold smile. You didn't read the fine print, he said. You don't understand business like I do. This is for your own good. I wanted to scream, to cry out in frustration and betrayal. The grief for my father was now tangled with a new, bitter pain. But I knew fighting blindly wouldn't help. I needed to be patient, careful. So I started watching, listening, gathering every detail he let slip. He thought I was broken, too lost in love and lost to see clearly. But inside, I was already planning my next move. That inheritance, meant to be my safety net, had become a chain. But I wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. It was a receipt that gave it away, folded neatly inside the pocket of his coat, buried beneath a crumpled tissue and a pair of sunglasses. A receipt from a boutique hotel 2 cities over. 2 nights, 1 suite, champagne on arrival. It wasn't his handwriting in the special requests section. It was hers. A neat, loopy scrawl. Please make sure the bed is covered in rose petals. I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race. It just settled, like my body had already known, and this was just the moment my mind caught up. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started tracing the pieces backward. I checked our joint account under the guise of organizing bills. I found transfers to names I didn't recognize. Boutique stores. International flights. Spa packages. When he said he was at a conference in Berlin, he was actually in Paris. I found the photos next. Buried in the shared cloud storage he never bothered to secure. A folder labeled temp docs that, to him, probably meant invoices or drafts. But it wasn't invoices. It was them. Her sitting on his lap in a hotel robe. Her posing beside the Eiffel Tower, wearing the scarf I bought him for Christmas. And then, her again in a different city, this time in front of a sleek condo door. The same condo he once joked about buying as a rental property. It was in her name, but the mortgage came from our account. My inheritance. The one thing my father left me. The one thing I was told would be safe. Everything, the gifts, the vacations, the luxury, had been paid for with my money. With the trust one gave him in my most vulnerable moment. And he hadn't just used it. He'd weaponized it. Against me. What cut deepest wasn't the affair. It was the intent. This wasn't impulsive. This was structured. Quiet. Strategic. He didn't plan to tell me. He planned to leave. Buried in his laptop were outlines for a new business registered under his mistress's name. Emails between them about starting fresh somewhere warm. Bank transfers stacked and silent. Like I was being erased, efficiently, cleanly. He came home late that night, talking about client dinners and meetings that ran over. He kissed me absently on the forehead, poured himself a drink, and scrolled through his phone like everything was normal. But everything had changed. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. Let him believe he still had the upper hand. Because I knew now. And he had no idea what I was capable of. He always thought the company was his. That he built it, grew it, and carried it on his back. What he didn't know. I was there before the first dollar came in. Before the name was even decided. I co-founded it. Strategized its model. Hired the first team. Wrote the pitch decks. Secured the early funding. Mine. But when we got engaged, he said, let's simplify things. Publicly, I'll be the face. Clean and clear. Investors prefer a single figure. At the time, I didn't care. I was young. In love. And too trusting. We kept my ownership quiet. I signed documents that kept me off press releases and board listing. But my name, my legal name, was etched deep in the original formation paper. And not for a small share. I owned 70%. I never told him I kept the originals. I never told him I paid the first developer out of my own saving. I never told him my father's lawyer helped draw up the structure. Because I never imagined I'd need to use any of it against him. Until now. The day I found out about the affair, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened my old lockbox and pulled out the file folder with a thin layer of dust on top. Inside were copies of contracts, email trails, founding partner agreements, all airtight. He'd always assumed I had nothing, that the inheritance was all I had left. He forgot where he came from and who helped him get there. So I hired a lawyer, quietly, discreetly, someone who didn't blink at the story I told, someone who respected silence more than spectacle. We built the case slowly, meticulously. Paper trails, timelines, financial records, all laid out with surgical precision. I watched him move through the house like a king, smug and untouchable, while I smiled back like a ghost. Let him enjoy it. Let him believe he won. He had no idea the ground beneath him had already started to crack. And I was the one pulling the strings now. I thought I had already seen the worst of him. The lies, the affair, the theft of my inheritance. But the final blow came quietly, like a knife slid between ribs when you're not looking. He waited until I was half asleep on the couch, a movie playing in the background. That's when he sat beside me, sighed heavily, and said, "I made a decision." He said it like it was nothing. "I took the last portion of your inheritance and invested it," he added, watching my reaction out of the corner of his eye. "In something promising. A startup." He reached for my hand. "It's for us." I didn't ask which startup. I already knew. Her. He'd funneled the final piece of my father's legacy, my last connection to him, into his mistress's business. A boutique PR agency she had no qualifications to run. The same woman he whispered to in hotel rooms and sent roses to from my account. He even faked emotion, rubbed his eyes like he might cry. "I just want to make sure we're okay in the long run," he said, like he hadn't already dismantled everything we built. "You trust me, right?" I nodded. Silent. Empty. But inside, something snapped. Later that night, I passed by his office. He was on the phone. The door cracked open just enough for me to hear. "She didn't even flinch," he laughed. "She's too soft. Too sentimental. She'll never know what hit her." He said it so casually, as if I were nothing more than a loose end to be handled. That was it. That was the moment I stopped mourning and started moving. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in and expose what I knew. That's not how you destroy a man like him. Instead, I played my part. I acted hurt, confused. I let my shoulders slump and my eyes water when he walked into the room. I let him think I still believed in him, that I was devastated but still his. He spooned soup into a bowl for me the next day, humming like life was fine. I smiled and thanked him. He thought he'd broken me, but what he didn't see was the file I'd placed with my attorney that morning, or the forensic accountant quietly pulling records of every investment he'd ever made using my name, or the company documents I had already updated behind the scenes, removing his access, freezing accounts, rerouting communications. I stopped reacting and started preparing. He thought the game was over, but for me it was just beginning. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. No shouting matches. No broken glass or slammed doors. Revenge, if it was going to be done right, needed precision. Timing. Silence. The first move came through my lawyer. A clean, quiet motion filed with the board and the state, reinstating full operational control of the company back to me. My 70% ownership had never changed. I had just stayed in the background. Now, I was done hiding. We revoked his financial access immediately. Credit cards? Canceled. Expense accounts? Frozen. The company car? Repossessed the next morning. I didn't tell him. I let the system speak for me. Next came the audit. I'd suspected some level of misuse, but even I wasn't prepared for what we found. Dozens of unauthorized transfers, fake vendor payments, luxury expenses labeled as consulting. He was sloppy, overconfident, probably assumed I'd never look, that I was still sitting at home with teary eyes and a broken heart. But I wasn't broken. My legal team drafted a letter to his mistress, formal, firm, and delivered by hand. She had 14 days to return all misappropriated funds or face charges of conspiracy and fraud. Her silence was immediate and telling. By the end of the week, I made the final move. I called an emergency board meeting, remote but mandatory. When he logged on, his face dropped. He hadn't been invited as a participant. He was there as an item on the agenda. HR read the termination clause line by line. He tried to interrupt, voice rising, confusion turning into panic. But it was useless. I had every document, every signature, every timestamp. When it was over, there was only silence on his end. He logged off without a word. I sat back in my chair and exhaled, for the first time in months. The company was mine again. My life was mine again. And he? He had no idea what losing everything really felt like. Not yet. The boardroom felt colder than I remembered. He was already seated when I walked in, flanked by his usual arrogance and a freshly pressed suit. The confidence in his face faltered when he saw me, like a man spotting a ghost he thought he buried. I didn't sit. "I'm the owner," I said calmly. "Always have been." There was a moment of stunned silence. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to the board members, searching for support. He found none. He laughed nervously. "What is this? Some kind of misunderstanding." I slid the folder onto the table. Inside, founding documents, ownership agreements signed and notarized. Every piece of proof that I was never just his wife or some passive investor. "I built this company," I said, locking eyes with him. "Before you had a name, I had a vision. And you just rode the wave." He tried to speak, to spin a version where this was all a mistake. "If you were unhappy, you could have said something. We could have fixed it." I pressed play on my phone. The room filled with his voice, cold, smug, unmistakable. "She's too soft. She'll never know what hit her." That was followed by a second clip. "Once the money's gone, I'll be out. She'll never recover. She's sentimental. Weak." The room shifted. Then the door opened. My legal team stepped in, followed by HR. They handed him 2 sets of papers, one for his termination, the other for divorce. He didn't speak, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew it was done. I'm not here for revenge, I told him. I'm here to reclaim what was already mine. He tried to call me that night. 10 missed calls, a message that simply said, she left. Of course she did. Turns out mistresses don't like men with no money, no title, and no future. I didn't respond. Some endings don't need words. The house was quiet. Not the kind of silence that follows a storm, but the kind that signals peace. He was gone. The lies were gone. The weight lifted. I stood in front of the mirror one morning and didn't see the woman he tried to erase. I saw someone sharper, stronger, unapologetically clear. I filed the name change paperwork without hesitation. His last name meant nothing now. Mine. It had history, meaning, and pride behind it. I took it back, not just legally, but emotionally. Rebuilding wasn't easy, but it was mine to do. I restructured the company, brought in people I trusted, and shifted focus toward growth, ethics, and long-term stability. I even launched a new division, led entirely by women. And every time I walked into the boardroom, I carried myself like someone who'd earned her seat and survived a fire to keep it. I started saying yes to things I used to put off, not to run from the past, but to remind myself that life was always bigger than what he tried to shrink me into. I've been asked why I stayed so long. It wasn't weakness. It was belief, first in love, then in loyalty, then in the version of him I wanted to be real. You hold out hope longer than you should when you believe someone once saw the best in you. But I see it now. He only ever saw what he could take. Still, I don't hate him. He taught me something I'll never forget. Never hand over power to someone who doesn't respect you. That mistake, I'll never make it again. If you're in a place where you feel unseen, unheard, or underestimated, don't rush. Don't break. Just prepare. Because when the time is right, silence becomes strength. And patience, that's the deadliest weapon you'll ever wield.